Well, I'd like to introduce our next presenter. Matthew Bowler is the managing partner at Mandala, a digital marketing firm located here in Bend. In addition to guiding client strategy, Matthew also serves as an advisor to both venture capital and other investment firms and private equity firms as well. So please welcome Matthew.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. So my name is Matthew. I own a marketing agency here in town, been in Bend for a little over 20 years, and I've had the honor of working with some great local companies, and as my company has grown, also the opportunity to work with some regional and national brands. And the presentation that I'm going to give today is focused on marketing in a time of disruption. I don't think I really need to talk about what the disrupting forces are, but I do think it's fair to say that the disruption that we're experiencing right now is unprecedented. And while there's a lot of obvious pain and hurt associated with this, there's also tremendous opportunity. In marketing terms, disruption is good. A lot of what you guys are either seeking to invest in or take advantage of is marketplace disruption. Startup companies oftentimes talk about white space, destructing a category, or reinventing a category and creating a new opportunity that has a disruptive effect on the way people do things. So disruption from a venture perspective is often something that we're seeking to create. What's different is today, there's tremendous disruption in the market that's been created by an outside force. The thing about disruption that we all want to take advantage of is the fact that disruption changes behavior. And in marketing terms, behavior change is very difficult to do. And I'll give you an example. By raising of hands, how many people in this room like to drink whiskey? Okay. So later tonight, we're going to be serving some Stafford's Reserve bourbon. I'd like for you to try it. It's free. So of the people who raise their hands, how many people are likely to take me up on that offer? Okay. So now of the people that didn't raise their hands, that didn't say that they liked whiskey, how many of you drink beer? Okay. Whiskey is made from the same kind of wort or original fermentation as beer. The only difference is that we distill it. And the whiskey that we'll be serving later tonight is internationally award-winning. It's one of the top small batch distilleries in the country. You interested in trying it now? Okay, so I'm getting a nod. So the first group has a known behavior that's attractive to me as a bourbon distiller. It's easy for me to convert the group that has the behavior that I want to change. I move you from your known product over to my product, relatively easy. I don't have to offer much, just a free sample. The second group that doesn't like whiskey is so much harder. It's not that I can't do it, but I need you to pay attention to me. I need you to invest your time in me. I need you to listen to me. So in a market that's not being disrupted, it's harder for me to change behavior. So if I'm a startup, or if I'm investing in startups, I need to think about how much work is involved in changing the behavior of the market to get the outcome that I want. Again, changing behavior, hard to do. But changing behavior changes markets. So if you can do it, it can be incredibly profitable because you do move into a white space, you do disrupt, you do create a new solution. And how do we normally do it? We normally do it with innovation. We do it by taking a great solution and scaling it. We do it by inventing something that someone hasn't invented before. Again, difficult to do, but if you can do it, you can make a tremendous amount of money. So disruption changes markets. And as I said before, we are in a very disruptive marketplace. And that brings with it tremendous opportunity. These are no-brainers, right? If you consider 2020, the market valuation of Amazon jumped. Robinhood, now valued, I think, at just shy of $12 billion after their raise earlier this fall. Zoom, redonkulous valuation, right? So you don't have to be a genius to see this. Retail was dead or dying, and now it is dead. E-commerce has taken over. It's sort of obvious that Amazon would be on the upside of that, along with Walmart and some other players. Robinhood, fintech is redefining financial services, has been for a long time. But what we've seen is we've seen a step change. As behavior has changed through 2020, there's been a step change in that arena. And then Zoom, I don't know that I would have seen this coming, but with the changes as everyone goes to work from home, the digital nomad is created, I don't think we're going back. So since it's not likely that we own companies that are sitting in the position those three were, how do we take advantage of behavior change in markets? And that's essentially what I do for a living. Yes, I run an agency. Yes, I create advertising campaigns. Yes, we build brands and those sorts of things. But the role I play with the private equity companies that I work with is more centered on how we understand markets and how we take advantage of those, either through company creation or investment in other folks doing the same thing. And what we do is we track behavior change. And this comes from a decade-plus experience in e-commerce, and then layering in understanding what one needs to do to drive profitable e-commerce in a variety of different industries. And the key is to understand what the market behavior is, and we do that by tracking intent and behavior online. So we're working with a director of our search department who came from a company in town that works predominantly with Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. We take that methodology and we apply it to the portfolio of companies that we're working with. Internet usage in 2020 has increased by 41%. You probably noticed that your website download speeds have dropped, on average 27%. Reason for that is the infrastructure hasn't been able to keep up with the velocity of search. There's just so much more activity as people are not sitting in an office. There's so much more activity online as they look to conduct their businesses from home or conduct their lives from home. And what we're doing is we're looking at the behavior online and evaluating how it impacts markets that we care about. So there's been a tremendous growth in search activity, but it's not homogeneous, meaning people aren't searching today for what they were searching for this time last year. And that's obvious, right? You look at Amazon, you look at Robinhood, you look at Zoom, people are behaving in a different way. But if you understand how the behavior has changed, you can understand how to take advantage of that change in behavior for the benefit of your company or as an investor for the benefit of your portfolio. Inherent in this is not only to understand what has changed, but to understand how it has changed. So when we conduct the analysis, we're looking at search behavior, we're measuring intent, and then we're comparing it against what was happening historically. So if you think of a category that's had significant growth, it's important to understand how that growth has happened and where that growth has come from. Because if you understand that, then you can reframe your company, you can reframe your brand, and you can position it in the marketplace against what people are looking for. And that reframing and that repositioning puts you in front of the people that want to drink whiskey with your efficient story versus putting you in front of people who don't like to drink whiskey, who require a lot of convincing to get them to change their behavior. And the thing that makes it so exciting right now is that creating disruption's really hard. And in marketing terms, hard is expensive. So if you have a disrupted environment and you understand what it is the market's looking for as it pertains to your market segment, then aligning your product and your company or your portfolio with where there's upward movement is a surefire way to growing your company. Here's a representation of the markets that we're actively doing this in. So Honeywell is a client of mine. They went out and rolled up 3 footwear brands. So they're a defense industry, right? Do a bunch of stuff in aviation. They went out and bought 3 footwear brands. Iconic, low volume. Those 3 companies, as they moved away from wholesale to e-commerce, have exploded this year. Private jet charter. Private jet charter's up 100% year over year, right? No real surprise why. We work with a private jet service. It's actually one of the folks that I advise, has his own jet, has his own flight department. He stood up a charter department inside his existing flight department so that he could draw on the benefit from the 2x growth in private charter. Knowing how to sell it into that market, super important if you want to make money doing it. Hotels and resorts. There's a tremendous amount of money moving into that space, especially around urban hotels because they're going bankrupt. So you're seeing private equity firms get excited about acquisition, reposition in anticipation of the market changing in the next year or 2. So where do you want to invest? What kinds of property do you want to invest in? Understanding how travel and tourism is changing is incredibly important in understanding how to make those investments. Everyone knows that there's flight from urban, right? People are leaving major cities, New York, San Francisco. Where are they going, right? They're leaving and they're going to less populous, less dense markets. So we're working with some folks in multifamily apartment development throughout the West Coast in helping them understand which markets make the most sense. One of my favorites, it's a private equity firm that decided to get into owning and developing self-service car washes. Sounds kind of bizarre, right? But inexpensive, incredibly profitable, low overhead, and there's 150% growth in search behavior around cleaning your own car. So we're in the process of rolling out properties predominantly on the West Coast with a view to then selling that on to another investor. So the strategy plays on from there in the sense that we're working in specific market segments. We conduct an analysis to understand the competitive landscape. What does the search behavior look like today? And then we roll it back 4 years and we look at emerging trends. And it's the emerging trends in the changing behavior of life in COVID. That's where the opportunities are for us and the companies that we work with to take advantage of that market change. The last 2 on the right, we work with a pretty large bank that's involved in introducing a lot of financial technology, and the healthcare marketplace is truly exploding. Obviously, the care delivery channels are changing, and human behavior has changed, and tremendous opportunity for growth and acquisition in that market segment. So I'd like to open up for anyone who has questions. I think there's a secondary slide that we're going to bring forward for those folks who are not in the room, with instructions on how to submit questions, I think either via Minty or text. I got a question in the back while we're waiting for that slide to come up. Yes, sir. So the question is whether we conduct the research internally or whether we outsource that capability. So we're not a scaled proposition. So I'm not trying to sell this service to 100 companies. We work with a small portfolio of partners, some of whom might be someone like Honeywell, and another might be a private equity firm. In those instances, what we're doing is we're conducting the research in-house, but we use a stack of technology that allows us to access the data, because the data is massive. And the process takes time. A competitive study, you're in the 6 to 8 week time frame to go through all of the various phases of discovery and analysis. Yes, sir.
Maybe a follow-up to that is, how has data changed how you do your work over the years, and maybe just even in the last 6 months?
So the question from Roger is, how has data changed the work that we do as a marketing agency, and how has it changed over the last 6 months? So taking the first half of that question, data, truly impacts everything that we do. We're very much oriented towards understanding the metrics that impact the businesses that we work with, and it's a requirement in our industry anymore to be building campaigns and measuring real-time performance and optimizing against what we see the market do. What's changed in the last 6 months is that the business models have changed. So where with Honeywell, we were working in an e-commerce environment with their 3 different brands. E-commerce was contributing 40% to their revenue. COVID hit, wholesale channel closes, and then the lion's share of their income now comes from .com, which is great because it's twice as profitable. But it didn't have the resource allocation in March that it has now. So you see a corporate emphasis on e-commerce because it necessarily needs to lead the charge. Now the challenge here is if you're not an e-commerce company, then oftentimes, in my experience at least, oftentimes the folks that are leading that e-commerce capability are not as cutting edge as they would be if it was an e-commerce company. So what we find is that the folks are going through a steep learning curve, and there's tremendous pressure that comes from the management team and the ownership group to ensure that the profitability is there, because they're looking at furloughing employees and looking at laying people off if they can't bridge that gap. So there's a much greater emphasis on what that channel is and can do for them. And there's a tremendous learning curve in trying to understand how to drive e-commerce returns. And that really is conversion rate optimization, which is a discipline that some companies get really, really well, others don't. And there are so many things that impact your conversion rate. And it truly is very, very data-centric. So the second half of that question, Roger, is the folks that we work with have gotten much, much more interested in what the data is telling them, and they've gotten necessarily a lot smarter in understanding how to leverage it to grow their companies. Yes?
Are you seeing a shift in ad campaigns from paid ads to content creation?
That's a great question. And thank you for raising it. So are we seeing a movement from paid advertising to content creation? And the simple answer is yes, but not necessarily a from and to, more of an increase in both. And here's where it's important, especially if you're a smaller company. There's so much more money being spent in online advertising than there was this time last year, because companies have to. They're not supporting a wholesale channel necessarily. They're not traveling to trade shows, and they're still trying to either maintain, get back to where they were, or grow their business, right? So there's an allocation of resource that's gone into what I would consider paid, whether that's display, programmatic, social, search, right? Those are the big arenas, really. But here's the interesting thing. The more in tune your content is, the more efficient your ad spend is, because the buying engines want to reward a conclusive or favorable search. So if I advertise bourbon and I send someone through to a website talking about vodka, I get penalized, so it costs me more money. But if my content matches my advertising, it's more efficient. So here's where it gets exciting. As the market disrupts, the ownership of key content on the internet is fair play, right? Because the big brands don't own it, because the big brands weren't sitting on it, right? So if you're in a market segment and you're trying to compete with well-established companies, and the behavior and intent changes, then all of a sudden the content that was of highest value is no longer controlled by the folks that you're competing with. So a large part of what we do is create prescriptive content cards, which guide a company on what content they should create and exactly where should they put it. How do they optimize it in their site? How do they integrate it into a blog? How do they create content inside social media? How do they define to influencers what it is that they want to do for them? All with a view to owning that content online so that they can take advantage of behavior change and change in intent. Yeah, so great question. On the last part, public relations. This I think is often misunderstood. Public relations can take your message to scale faster than any other channel that you can think of. You have to do it right, though. And when you understand the data and when you understand how intent and search behavior, market behavior is changing, then you know where to send your PR team. And your PR team will be relatively inexpensive compared to the digital efficacy. What I mean by that is if the message is on point, then the influencers and the market publishers will want to tell that story because that's the story that the market wants. And if the content is good, you can scale your message very, very fast for a relatively small amount of money. You just have to understand what to do with that resource.
Can you give an example on that last point, PR?
Yeah, so one of the companies that we work with is in the health supplement market space. We drop into COVID, and they're tiny. It's a startup out of New York, run by a woman who had a lot of success with another supplement. She licensed some IP, and she went to market. So their marketing budget's, well, it's small. We drop into COVID, shelter in place. There's an emphasis now on personal wellness, right? Everyone knows that. We've all read the stories. People are working out. At home, bicycle sales went through the roof. People are looking at ways of staying healthy. Included in that were increase in spend in vitamins, increased search behavior around wellness products. So we worked on the two obvious strategies, right? We buttoned up the e-commerce side. We locked things down for the Amazon play. And then we went and we pursued a really aggressive PR initiative. We partnered with a PR team in New York who have got really good connections in that publishing community. Publishing is truly dispersed, right? But there's still a nexus of publishers in the Manhattan environment that we were able to connect with in a kind of a desk side manner because the relationships were there. And we were able to deliver very valuable content that led to explosive growth in traffic to the site, which then drove e-commerce sales. It tends to be a little bit hit and miss. It's difficult for you to maintain that level of exposure, but for a relatively small amount of money, it really can bring a lot of early stage attraction and then momentum. Oh, I'm sorry. What else do you see? Okay, so remote care delivery is a rather obvious sector that has advantage in the current era. What else do you see in healthcare that might be less obvious? So I think delivery systems have changed, absolutely, and they're incredibly inefficient. When you look at the way in which healthcare as an industry is treating this, the healthcare delivery systems for telemedicine, I think, are incredibly inefficient. They're difficult to use, right? So I think there's tremendous opportunity in finding more efficient and user-centric ways of doing that. But I think that's what the person asking the question is asking me. So the other side to this is that wellness has exploded. There is a tremendous amount of money being spent in understanding how to deal with stress. Insomnia has jumped 40%. So how do I become healthy in the way in which I sleep? How do I become healthy in the way in which I eat? How do I become healthy in the way in which I care for those that I perhaps cannot interact with? Maybe they're compromised and I feel uncomfortable physically connecting with them. So if you were to go in, depending on what your company does, if you were to go in and study that landscape, what would happen is you would start to understand what it was that people were most concerned about and what it was that they were most desirous of. And if you know those two things, then you can position your company to take advantage of that, and then you can leverage that into outward bound messaging and then conversion optimization, all depending on what it is that you're seeking to do. But healthcare right now has massive opportunity, primarily because we're so concerned about it. I don't think a day goes by without us thinking about it. And the delivery system that exists is not going to catch up fast enough. They just can't. Huge, huge opportunity in that market segment. I can't see the back of the room if there's any more questions. Yes. So the question, and if I get this wrong, correct me. The question, as I understand it, is how are we scoping the impact of the disintermediation of urbanization and move towards rural, this idea of digital nomad and work from home, is that correct? Okay, so how are we scoping the long-term impacts of work from home and this idea of being a digital nomad? It's a great question, and it's a difficult one to truly answer. Here's what we're seeing, though, because we're looking at this idea from a couple of different industry aspects. We're looking at it from housing, we're looking at it from tourism, and we're also looking at it from a banking perspective. Our understanding right now is that people have gone through a change that they didn't really want to go through, but now they don't really want to go back. There are benefits to being separate from a work environment that people are finding attractive. The problem that people are facing, though, is how do I solve my socialization issues? That's where a lot of the indicators for depression, when we look at wellness, depression and insomnia and some of the associated eating disorders are more associated with the fact that people are socially disconnected versus feeling an aching need to go back into the workforce. Not into the workforce, I beg your pardon, back into an office. And I think the challenge that you'll see in an office environment is even as vaccines or treatments become available, there is not yet a sense of comfort with high density activity. So people genuinely are afraid of going into those kinds of environments. And what I think you'll see happen is I think you'll see employers structure compensation and working relationships in a way that allow people to feel comfortable and don't necessarily require them to come back in. But the data is truly not available to say in 5 years' time, once this is truly in the rearview mirror, what will everything look like? Yes.
Chris, are you working with any businesses that are in a service industry that have, like, in order to, just service industry in general? And how can they restructure things and still find themselves profitable? Do you work with any of those companies?
So the question is, do I have experience working with companies in the service industry? And how have they restructured themselves in order to be profitable? Is that correct? Okay. Sort of, I guess the first part of that question. So we work with a rather large bank with branches from Seattle down to Dallas. They have and had branches open throughout the entire footprint. And a large part of their strategy was the ability for their clients to interact with a top 50 multi-billion-dollar bank, but still have the personal interaction in a branch environment. Now all of those branches are closed. So necessarily what you see happen is a migration into technology. That's where fintech always was taking over. And the traditional banks are moving there slowly. Well, this has really pushed them over the edge. So you are seeing technology solutions. I think when you get down to a true service level where face-to-face, like a restaurant, something like that, I think that's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult to overcome the changes in the way in which we all have to live and work. And I honestly, I think that many of those service industry businesses are going to go bankrupt. I just don't see how the restaurants can recover. I don't see how the hotels can recover. I don't see how shopping malls can recover. So part of what I think we're going to see, and also one of the companies that's inside our private equity portfolio is a real estate owned or REO asset disposition company. And we're actively prospecting banks right now with a view to helping them with the disposition of toxic assets or non-performing real estate when we come out of the artificial shelter that we're in right now. So right now you can't foreclose on a home. You can actually, in Oregon, you can start to proceed against someone for a commercial building. Come the new year, the real estate fallout is going to be massive. I don't know how to solve that problem, I'm afraid. Okay. Any more questions? Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.